The end of the book of Philippians really has a lot of examples. There's this idea that Paul's in prison and he's very grateful for the church and what they've done, and he is encouraging the church to look at Jesus and how Jesus was, and to kind of let that be a model for their life. But then he kind of goes on and presents some examples of that. And one of the examples is his own life, and then there are others who have come to help him and put their lives on the line. And what is the reason for Paul kind of structuring the letter this way, do you think?
I think it's maybe just to show that, that Jesus is the model, and that pattern is being followed not just by Paul but by some of them, and I think it's just an encouragement to increase the engagement. It talks about them, as much as obviously this is the closest church to him, but at the beginning of the letter he talks about how I hope that you grow in knowledge and in your love, even more so. And I think he's just looking for further encouragement to continue on down that path to model Jesus even better.
Yeah, and it seems to be that he's really showing that conforming ourselves to Christ is, and manifesting that in the way that we live is really the whole point of the endeavor. And somehow we can kind of miss that, I think. And when you look at Christian culture, what are some of the substitutes or idols, do you think, that kind of creep in and take our eyes off of just the simple idea of looking at the pattern of Jesus and making sure that we live that out?
One of them might be simply avoiding conflict and pursuing comfort. They definitely can become idols, and a couple of the more ones that I'm more prone to struggle with myself.
Yeah, I think those are big ones in our culture, and I think that we have this tendency to judge the blessings of God based on how easy is my life, right? And that seems kind of crass, and when you just throw it out there like that, I think a lot of Christians would say, well, that's silly. And yet, this seems to be something. I mean, you hear people pray about this stuff all the time, and I'm not trying to, obviously, if somebody's prayed this prayer, in my presence, I don't want them to feel guilty about it, because obviously, it's not just one prayer. It's is this a pattern of prayer in your life? But the point is that when you think about the kind of prayers that we share with each other, the praises and the prayer requests, a lot of them are oriented around our comfort and convenience. Now, how do we know when that's becoming a problem?
I think when those begin to make up the bulk of our prayer life, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I think God cares about the little things and the big things. And I do think, our comfort is mentioned in Scripture, maybe not in the same material way that maybe we're thinking of it now and stuff like this. But if you kind of try to picture Jesus and him having a prayer life that kind of looked like this, it's not what we view at all.
I think also one of the things that happens is not only does this start to make up the bulk of our prayers, but then when things happen that are very inconvenient, our attitude toward that is kind of indicative of whether this is becoming a problem. Because I see that in my own life, is when things are going wrong, I don't always respond to it in a way that says, "Hey, God, what do you want me to learn from this?" In a way of trust and love. It's kind of, oh, why is this happening? And then you talked about the idea of the absence of conflict. Why is it that we have such a problem with that? Because I really think that's a big problem in a lot of aspects of our culture, but especially our Christian culture.
That's a great question. I don't know if I know the ultimate answer. I know that I'm not a big fan of conflict. My wife is not a big fan of conflict, and I would say we're closer to that end of the spectrum than others. And I know people who conflict, all day long. In fact, they love conflict, and so it's definitely something I personally struggle with more than I'd say even the average person. but something, especially in having become a parent, that I realize is not a virtue.
Right. Where do we cross the line between, the Bible tells us that as far as possible we should live at peace with others, and obviously going around creating conflict is not something that we should be engaging in. But how do we know when we're kind of crossing the line into something that's a little bit unhealthy there?
I think sometimes if we're unwilling to tell somebody the truth, to tell them the truth to their detriment, we're no longer pursuing their good. We're putting the avoidance of conflict higher than their good.
Why do you think, it seems to me like, ultimately we want God to think well of us. Why is it so hard for us it seems like we have this desire for men to think well of us that sometimes overcomes the desire for God to think well of us. Why is that so important to us?
That's a great question, and maybe that's something that's overcome by spending more time with God. And we definitely are surrounded by men all day long, and for many of us, it's difficult to kind of have that focus. Paul, even in this letter to Philippians, talks about those who are kind of really focused on the things that are on the earth, and maybe that's it. We're just too earthly minded.
So Paul here is really using the idea of these people who are examples of living out the faith to encourage the believers, and I don't know that we always maybe give enough weight to the idea that how we live and the faith that we show, how important that is to those around us. Do you find in your own life that this is something that is really important and helpful to you, or do you feel like that it doesn't really matter what those around you are doing, you're going to plow forward?
Oh, 100% matters. You look at, and you can kind of look at the negative side of it as well, and you can, if somebody who you view as being strong in the faith falls, and maybe falls in a very public way and stuff like that, that can definitely dampen your mood, so to speak. And on the other side, it's definitely very encouraging when you feel like you're engaged in this task of making disciples and stuff like that, and that it's a fight that you're not alone in. It's one you're fighting with others, and there's others who are doing it well, and it's a total encouragement along the way.
Yeah, I think that we often don't, even though we desire community and we want to live in a community, and we can talk about the importance of community. I don't know that we really understand just how vital it is for that I have a responsibility not just to live well so that I can be blessed and have a close relationship with God, but the impact that my living well has on those around us.